And welcome to Life Unrehearsed. Matt Del Vecchio here, specializing in home care, downsizing in the senior living industry. Thank you for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed, where we try to provide families and their loved ones throughout their aging process with some resources and advice at a time where our healthcare system is really stretched to its limits. We have a jam-packed show today. Coming up in the first half of the show, settling an estate can be overwhelming and confusing. Well, we're going to hear and share some helpful tips to make the estate settlement process more effective and a little less stressful. And I'm going to talk about the importance of protection mandates and how to make them come to fruition through a court procedure called homologation. And on the second half, how to access home care through the public and private systems. And it's National Caregiver Day this coming Tuesday. I'm going to be talking to caregiver specialist Claire Webster about ways to help caregivers throughout their caregiving journey. Thank you for joining me here on Life Unrehearsed. Hope you're enjoying your rainy Sunday. At least it's warming up a little bit so we get out of that frozen rain and freezing rain. You know, dealing with the loss of a loved one is difficult to begin with. And one of the many tasks at hand is estate settlement. A key player in the process is the executor, who has the responsibility of executing the deceased's wishes, managing assets, and ensuring the smooth transition of estates. Well, joining me today is Jerry Grossman, the founder and president of for Executor Estate Settlement Services at Service Comptable. Jerry Grossman. Jerry, welcome back to Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for coming into studio here. Such an important issue. You may be named executor, but when it actually comes time to being the executor, it's a whole different ballgame. So what are the key responsibilities of an executor during the estate settlement process?
So that's a very, very good question. So there's a multitude of administration functions that an executor or a liquidator has to perform. So the term sometimes is used interchangeably. Liquidator is the term in Quebec. The rest of Canada use the term executor. So the administration functions that you have to do: you'd have to get numerous copies of the death certificate, obtain and review the will and the codicils, if they're applicable, have the will search done by the Chambre de notaire, the Barreau de Québec. This system in Quebec actually is better than it is in Ontario, where if you don't have a will, you have to really look for it. In Quebec, we have the will search, which is good. And if the will is done by a lawyer, it's going to have to be probated. If it's done by a notary, it's a lot faster. Other functions, you have to advise the post office, communicate with legal financial advisors. You have to also determine if there's any life insurance, and if applicable, apply for and collect the life insurance, cancel credit cards, cancel old age security. And sometimes what happens is, I just had a case just recently in the past month where I got a call from the old age security where I am the liquidator, and I said to the lady, I said, "I guess we owe you some money." She says, "No, we actually owe you." And what happened was nobody could reach the person that was deceased or the family, so they cut off the old age security pension for 7 months. So we're waiting to get that money back. Other things that the liquidator has to do is cancel Quebec pension benefits, apply for the death benefit, obtain a refund in the driver's license, open an estate account, transfer all accounts to the estate account, deal with real estate, RSPs, etc., etc. And what else?
Well, just already there, Jerry, is a mouthful. It's amazing what you've just said, and it can get confusing. And I'm glad you mentioned probate. You know, we say we do things wrong here in Quebec. On this part, we do have it right. You know, probate can be very, very difficult in the rest of Canada. But all those things you just listed, Jerry, what proactive initiatives can we do in advance regarding estate settlements?
So proactive, this is actually very interesting. I was surprised myself. One of the first things is to make sure that you have a will. There's probably, I read somewhere a while ago, about 50% of the people do not have a will.
It's an amazing stat. It's true. We've had a couple notaries on the show.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised.
Yeah. A little scary.
And if you do have a will, you should review it regularly. It's very nice that you have a will, but you should review it. Make sure that the beneficiaries that you have are what you may have done that will 10 years ago. Make sure it's still applicable. Whoever's the liquidator, make sure that they are able to handle the job. I've been involved in a couple of files where somebody died without a will, and it's a nightmare. They had a business. I've been involved in a file where a lady died. 4 daughters don't live in Canada, and I was appointed as the liquidator and had to deal with everything there. And another file where a gentleman passed away, wealthy gentleman, but was a hoarder and had all kinds of things. So you have to, these are things to organize your affairs in advance. And, like very often, like you say, happy wife, happy life, then you want to make things easier for your loved ones. And the event of your death, you want to make sure your loved ones are taken care of. It's very easy. People don't want to deal with this, but it's important to deal with these things. So I always tell people what's important to do in advance. Have an inventory of your assets. Keep a list of who are the key people that you should speak to, who their phone numbers, a list of also your investments, your professional advisors, names, addresses, where you keep all your information, and everything that you would need in that area. You want to keep stress to a minimum. And, very often people, we organize so many things in our lives. We plan our vacations, we plan our days, we try to help family members and our children, and we're always busy, busy, busy. But how many of us sit down and plan and organize for end-of-life issues? This is an important thing, and people have to, they want to avoid thinking about it, but if you do it properly, you're going to avoid stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Essential conversations that are necessary. Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Del Vecchio here, and I'm talking with Jerry Grossman about estate settlement. I'll also throw in social media nowadays. Make sure you have passwords of someone, of your loved one. So important. Now, Jerry, what are some of the most common mistakes that liquidators should avoid during the actual estate settlement process?
Okay, so that's a good question as well. So one of the things is you, as a liquidator, you're representing the deceased. So you have to follow what the deceased put in the will. You can't go and make your own decisions and think that it might be better. You have to follow that precisely. I'll give you a couple of examples. One that was actually this week. I had one of the beneficiaries of an estate sent me an email. Could he get some monies because he fell on hard times and he needs money. He doesn't have a job and he's out of work. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything because I have to follow what's in the will. And another file where I had was there was a liquidator. A lady had passed away, no children, nieces and nephews. It was actually a large estate. And the liquidator wanted to disperse some of the funds, and he was going to disperse to 10 nieces and nephews because the will said it's going to these nieces and nephews. And he says, I'm going to give it to them, but I also want to give it to the children of a nephew that passed away that's not in the will. And I said, listen, you have to speak to all the nieces and nephews. They're the beneficiaries if they agree. And they all agreed, but one of the husbands of the niece was a lawyer and said, you can't do that. You have to follow it. So I had him pay extra amounts to everybody, and they made a gift to the family. So these are things to, you have to follow it. Also, as the executor, you have to file the proper taxes and do it on time so you don't have any penalties.
Tons of things to be involved with. Just listening again, and all the more reason to get those checklists done in advance so you can make this process a little bit better. Jerry, we're quickly running out of time, but I really respect what you've done in life. You did a little pivot in life, if you will, and you saw obviously a need for liquidators and to help this process. People are emotional, and there you went and start up Jerry Grossman, Comptable Jerry Grossman. So tell me, what services do you offer?
So basically, I'm helping people to settle an estate where either somebody is a liquidator and they need help to settle the estate, or in some cases, children are out of town and they need to appoint somebody as the liquidator. And to be honest with you, the past 3 years that I've been doing this has been the most satisfying years in my professional career. I've worked for about 30 years as an accountant, a partner at an accounting firm, and I started this business. I'm enjoying it tremendously. And people can be overwhelmed by what they have to do, and I'm there to help them. And I've had some feedback from people. If you'll allow me, I'll just give some
real quick
comments quickly. Here, this is from a client of mine. I wanted to thank you for your patience, making things easy for me to understand, as well as helping move things forward when nothing was happening before. Another one from a lady. For the first 6 months after my father died, nothing happened with the estate. when Jerry got involved, he made things happen in a calm and intelligent fashion. So it's nice getting the feedback from these people.
It really is, and something that you've been a career man, and really took this on 3 years ago, and good for you. You've got a great big heart, very empathetic, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so much.
How do people get a hold of Jerry Grossman?
They could either call me at 514-502-6769, which is probably the best, or my email address is jerry@jgrossman.ca.
All right, Jerry. Thanks for coming in the studio. Very
My
valuable
pleasure.
advice.
Thank you for having me.
It. That's Jerry Grossman, owner of Comptable Jerry Grossman, helping you with liquidation and estate settlement. All right, coming right up, we're going to be talking about sometimes what can be a perceived difficult process. It's called homologation. Well, you know what? We should all, we just talked about Jerry and having our things in order. Well, everyone should have a power of attorney and protection mandate. In order to execute that protection mandate, it's called a homologation process. Well, we're going to be talking to a social worker about that entire process. But first, we're going to head out to the CJD Traffic Center and we're going to hear from Marty Lamar.